We've just observed our 2 minutes of silence along with millions of people, including everyone except, sadly, I understand, the Queen at the cenotaph where they'll be laying wreaths. But now the silence has ended, and it is now once again time for words of comfort, hope, and not least of honesty. So let us light our little flame in the spirit of remembrance, not just of fallen soldiers, and not only for the waste of war, but for all those memories dearest to our own hearts. Because this is a day unlike any other. Churches across the country would be full for a change. It's an occasion that's become an almost sacred ritual. The spirit of the day tends toward the traditional, the time-honored. And so this morning, let's give expression to those hymns and poetry of that national mood. And let's start with this old hymn, which you almost never would hear in one of our churches, but let's sing, "O God, Our Help in Ages Past," number 65. Well, good morning. Welcome. I said we were going to be a bit traditional today. I can think of nothing more traditional than the words of Stephen Spender in his great poem called "The Truly Great." I think continually of those who were truly great, who from the womb remembered the soul's history through corridors of light, where the hours are suns, endless and singing, whose lovely ambition was at their lips, still touched with fire, should tell of the Spirit, clothed from head to foot in song, and who hoarded from the spring branches the desires falling across their bodies like blossoms. What is precious is never to forget the essential delight of the blood drawn from ageless springs, breaking through rocks and worlds before our earth, never to deny its pleasure in the morning's simple light, nor its grave evening demand for love. Never to allow gradually the traffic to smother with noise and fog the flowering of the Spirit. Near the snow, near the sun, in the highest fields, see how these names are fated by the waving grass and by the streamers of white cloud and whispers of wind in the listening sky. The names of those who in their lives fought for life, who wore at their hearts the fire's center. Born of the sun, they traveled a short while toward the sun and left the vivid air signed with their honor. Would you sing for us, Law? I'll do the camera for you.
Oh, thanks.
The sun gone down, darkness be over me, my rest a stone. Yet in my dreams I'd be nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee. There let the way appear, steps unto heaven. All that thou sendest me in thy mercy given. Angels to beckon me nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee. Then with my waking thoughts bright with thy praise, out of my stony grief Bethel I will raise. So by my woes to be nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee. Or if on joyful wing cleaving the sky, sun, moon, stars forgot, upwards I'd fly. Still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee.
focus here. I asked Pauline to do a reading for us. And we'll try this as an experiment. Here's a microphone for the, don't worry about it, it'll be fine.
Crossing the desert. A child, as children do, become worried about death. Her grandmother had recently passed away, and her usual cheerfulness had turned into a new and worrying silence. Her parents didn't know what to do until someone suggested they send her to see an old Sufi woman called Murshida. The woman lived in a very dry region where the river that ran through the kingdom grew smaller and thinner, and at last trickled out into the sands of the desert. The girl and the old woman walked beside it. "Where has my grandmother gone?" she asked. "Did she stop existing?" "She has crossed the desert," said the old woman. "That's silly," said the child. "She was old. How could she cross a big desert?" They walked on until the river became a damp place in the sand and finally disappeared. "Where has the river gone?" asked the Susi. "It has vanished, dried up," said the girl. "And I say it has crossed the desert." "That's impossible. Water can't cross this large dry place." "It has crossed the desert by becoming the wind. The sun heated it until it became vapor. Then it rose like steam. The steam formed clouds, and the wind carried it safely across the desert, where it will fall again as water and make a new river." "And my grandmother?" "Shh," said the Sufi woman. "Listen to the wind."
Thank you. Thank you, Pauline. Let's take a moment now for ourselves and a little reflection. And on this day of silence, let us once again find our ways into the center of all meaning, that place where rights and wrongs dissolve, where sorrow and joy unite, where faith and doubt find peace with one another. Let us rejoin now in the good silence. One Spirit called Holy. We speak now in the presence of that one Spirit of life in whose name death is all too frequently offered. On this somber day, let us be at peace with the past. Not forgetting, but, oh God, not reliving the horrors that brought our forebears nearly to their knees. Not blaming, nor explaining, nor yielding to fantasies of victory and glory. Rather, let us hold the fading image of life cut short in waste as an emblem of warning, lest we imagine again that ours alone is the right to rule, to possess, and to control. And so let the demons that haunt our dreams take flight in the common air of earth. Let us now shelter the dead, not with bugles and bayonets, but with the gently folded flag of our ambition, and sing not of exploits, but of kindness, and not of justification, but of love. This is our prayer today, and we say, so be it. Inshallah, shalom. Amen. The next song is familiar to us all. We may only hear it at FA Cup finals and funerals, but it's worth being sung here this morning. Number 301, the Green Book, Abide With Me. What a beautiful tune. What a shame we can't sing it more often, but it's one of those themes that we touch only rarely, and I think that is perhaps unfortunate. Over my 30-something years in ministry now, I've stood stood in front of many congregations to talk about this day, this special, this difficult day. In the early years, people who had lived through the Second World War were in the seats out there. And as time has passed, those seats have all emptied. Along with the people went the memories that none of us can still lay claim to. The noise, the fear, the grief, the inconvenience, the dread of separation, and the loss of cherished ideals. And yes, maybe perhaps the boredom. Well, the next generation in line, my generation, heard tales of those days. My father came back from the war in the Pacific in 1945, and like many war veterans, didn't talk a lot about his experiences. I think that still goes on today with people who come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. There's something about it, almost as if to say what happened there stays there. But it also felt like you couldn't possibly understand, son, and I'm sparing you it. But a few things leaked out around the edges. A friend who was shot dead by a sniper on an island that had been cleared by Marines. A terrifying kamikaze attack on the convoy of oil tankers to which my dad was stationed. A combat knife, Japanese combat knife, he kept in a private drawer. Throughout my childhood, he used an unflattering nickname for Japanese people. Until his death, he refused to own a Japanese car or a Japanese television set. I hate to think how he must have gritted his teeth when I started sitting in Zen meditation. Within one generation, it seems, we have already started to forget. And the cry goes out every year, that plaintive cry, lest we forget, lest we forget. We must not forget. Well, over my career, this day has caused me quite a few difficulties. I began to realize that those who lived through the war didn't necessarily take kindly to my sort of light-hearted way of discussing it. A member of this very congregation some 15 years ago actually broke into tears of anger when he thought I was dismissing the symbol of the poppy. Well, we got that ironed out, and both of us learned from it, me, that the pain of war was very real to its survivors, and he, that time does erode the stark memories and leave younger generations unwittingly, shall we say, insensitive to their pain, which is why I always, without fail, wear this little scrap of red paper no matter what. And over the years, something else began to occur to me, underlying the theme of lost soldiers and the victims of war was something even more universal than that, a hatred of the very fact of death. It's at this season that people remember their dead, not just here, but certainly everywhere we might travel in Europe and North America. The Day of the Dead, in fact, officially is November 1st, the morning after Halloween, when spirits of the dead during the night were believed to have free reign. It's also called All Souls Day. I think it must have something to do with the dying of the year itself, when the warmth and ease of summer makes its annual exit. And in the little village in Spain where I used to live, people all go up the hill to the cemetery up on the highest point and have a picnic and spread their blankets onto the tombs of their dead and laugh and drink wine and have a good all day. And it's almost as if the dead are still there with them. But you don't see moist eyes there. You see smiles. When I witnessed it, I realized that that was how the local people dealt with death, how they managed it, corralled it, came into a relationship with it. And I've often wished that we too could have some way of accepting death or even discussing it without panic and fear. And so recently it brought me to think about the deaths that we have experienced here as a community and how we've dealt with them. If the season is now slowly leading from a focus on the war dead, the soldiers whom we never knew, into something new, as I suspect it is, then it should be right for us to integrate it into our thinking and into our worship. It has to be a time in which we consider those awful facts and maybe not so awful facts. Well, those of us who've been here for some time can remember some significant deaths among our members, and I apologize to those who haven't been. So I'm going to name a few now because they were not named properly at the time. Sid Haynes. Remember Sid? I can see him sitting back there, resolutely refusing to move forward, always at the back, as if at any moment he was going to bolt for the door. Joan Carrickey, widow of one of our longest serving ministers here, who left us quite a lot of money on her death, quite surprisingly. Michael Garrard. Michael, who chaired the church committee for the first dozen years I was here as minister. Marjorie Evans, a long-serving church member, former secretary of the church, whose family were responsible for acquiring that, our wonderful piano, and whose passing we did get around to marking here in a service a few weeks ago. And not least, there was Ray Harvey Amer. Remember Ray? How can you forget someone like Ray, whose work with Rainbows Across Borders has inspired and enlivened this congregation. So here's what I think. Let's think about those friends of ours today with love, whether we knew them or not. But the pandemic took more of us than that, either directly or indirectly. The three I'm going to mention now were not given a church funeral or memorial service because of the restrictions of lockdown. And they need some form of redress. The first, and perhaps the most unexpected, was our own Steve Dick, Reverend Steve Dick, a former minister and committee member of this church. It was Steve who coined the motto, "The Open Door," which we still use, and who first edited the newsletter of that name. He went on to become the chief executive officer of the General Assembly and then General Secretary of the ICUU, the International Unitarian Organization. It was Steve, above all, who organized the opening of the nursery across the parking lot in the back, the income from which sustains us. In later times, Steve did all the technical work of broadcasting our services and did it much better than I've ever been able to do. One morning he died in this room, doing congregational work. To say we miss him is an understatement. So let's spare a thought now for Steve and his family. And then soon after Steve came John Krask. John, father of Marion, granddad of Carrion and Bryn. John joined us late in his life after a long career and having made himself a home in France. He served for several years here as chairman of the committee following the death of Michael. And during his term, he was solely responsible for the improvement of that little garden out back here, which you can't miss if you go out there to get your car. And he was out there in his 90s, digging and hoeing on Sundays after service and making the rest of us feel terribly guilty. And coming in with little plants he brought all the way from East Grinstead. He had to travel for over an hour to get here on a Sunday. Then you'd see his long, lanky frame walking up the street from the station. And I thought that would go on forever. John, we hardly knew you. And the third of these quick fire losses was that of Henry Walsh. I don't know exactly how many years he was with us, but they were legion. I believe that he and his wife, our own dear Christine, were the longest serving members in the congregation, actually. I know that he had formerly served as church warden. Every time he came in on a Sunday, he would go straight to the thermostats and make sure everything was just right. And I served with him briefly on another committee, and he had a very take charge sort of warden attitude as well. He was the very image of that phrase, pillar of the community. He was like that, like a pillar. You know, things happened around Henry. He was one of the Kinder transport children brought out of Germany, out of Austria actually, Jewish kids, when the war began, along with his brother, who subsequently became a hero when he steered his plane into a field to his own death and avoided a village in Kent called Tenterden. Even as Henry got near his 100th birthday, yes, that's right, his 100th birthday, I couldn't imagine this church without him sitting there. To some extent, I still can't. As I speak these words, I know that there have been many, many like these three, valued members of this little community who've died so long ago now that there's nobody left to remember them. And so it is with all of us. No monument, no statue, not even a plaque like the ones held by the lucky few out here in the portico. The plaques are there, etched out in brass. We have no clue who any of them were. And yet something of these, of all of these, does remain. Each one was a link in a long chain of history. Each one left something of themselves behind, something that we have integrated into our living experience of this place, whether we know it or not. The meeting room upstairs, that was the pet project of Michael's. Suffield room, he was on that constantly. We can't walk past the plants in the garden out there without thinking about John bent over, digging and hoeing. Henry, I never light this chalice without thinking of him, because he and a wood turner, I'm told somewhere, actually made this. And we use it and have used it every Sunday for many a decade now. And likewise, Steve's presence permeates this room. And when I'm struggling to upload one of our amateurish videos onto the net, I think about him. I miss his perfectionism and his skill. But in that way, all have left their mark on us and all we do. Our community, it seems, doesn't just stretch across borders to other lands, as it's doing now via the internet. It seems like it also stretches beyond the grave. Nowadays in the U.S., when you meet somebody who served in the military and the armed forces, it's very polite to say, thank you for your service. And yes, we should say that. Thank you. We should say thank you to all the people coming back from foreign adventures by this country and my ex-country, all over the world, places where you might think they shouldn't have been. But we can say, thank you for your service. So along with the grief of loss that this day marks, there's also that, gratitude. Thank you. So let's say the same when we're reminded of those who we've lost. Sid, Marjorie, Ray, Joan, Steve, John, Henry, along with all those whose names I've forgotten to mention today. Thank you for your service. What you left behind may be invisible. It may not be something to be weighed and measured, but it is part of who we are. Amen. Just being cameraman. I love that song from the show called The Fantastics by an eponymous group, The Fantastics. It was playing in Greenwich Village when I lived there in the 1960s. That always takes me back. But it's right. Try to remember. When nobody wept except the willow. Yes. I can't think what messages I need to give you, but the next big event here at the church is going to be on the 19th of December, and that's the carol service. And as always, we'll have some kind of feast. We'll overeat. Anybody who wasn't here last Sunday, you have my sympathy. Was that a feast? It really was a feast, a good party, a good day. So thank all of you who helped make it work. Let's, oh yes, We're not collecting the offering yet. We will again someday, but there's a little box out there if you'd like to contribute money. Now let's sing. Number 226 in the grade book, Song of Peace. Our paths have joined once again in this simple act of remembrance. Now we separate, each to his or her own journey through this baffling and beloved world. But let us remember what we've shared all through the next week to come, and thereby look after one another, because we know we can, until we meet again. Amen.